Lovely. So welcome everybody once again. Our job today, Tracy and my job today, is to try and take the ick out of conflict. It's something that happens in a number of different ways in terms of whether it be inter-team, intra-team, or whether it's with other stakeholders, customers, suppliers, that sort of thing. And we want to look across the whole gamut today of how conflict can arise. And by the end of the hour, give you some tools and techniques that we use, whether that be in conflict resolution as part of the support that we provide our clients, or through mediation, or through training to try to manage those situations of conflict that can be used in all of those situations. Just to put us into a little bit of context before we get going, we, as Vista, you may not know us as an organisation, but we support some of the UK's largest employers with what you might describe as people challenges. So we support organisations and HR teams to deal with their employment law. Certainly that's my background. I'm an employment lawyer by background. But we don't just do what you might describe as normal lawyering. We also support them with mediation, with coaching, with leadership development, and employee relations and management training as well. We also support with investigations. So we're going to draw on all of those pieces of experience today. When we were putting this material together, we thought, let's just try and make sure we pull threads of all of the areas where we are interacting with conflict to give you something that hopefully is going to be relatable, easy to use, easy to remember. And at the end of the session, we'll send over to you a link of some of the key techniques that we talk about today. So let me start off then by a question. Why is it that as human beings, we perceive a difference of opinion to be negative? From your point of view, Tracy, what stands out for you on that?
I think what stands out for me is that we have to learn to have really good communication in the workplace. We need to be able to learn to communicate so that even if we sense there might be a difference of opinion at the beginning, we've got to find a great way of communication to help us get through to the end and find a constructive resolution for all of us. And the most important thing is keep good working relationships.
Yeah. And at the heart of that is the fact, therefore, that as human beings, we are social animals. We want to be in a herd. And this is the first sort of tool, if you like, that we wanted to share with you today, which is this idea that actually as social animals, we are influenced more by our unconscious mind than we think we are. And there's this piece of technique that actually first evolved from the 1950s. And at the time, it was positioned as being an explanation of how the human brain actually grew from a sort of neurological point of view. Since then, the science of that has been overridden by more sort of in-depth research, but still functionally, it's still accepted, this theory, as this is how our brain operates. And it boils down to the fact that we have three parts to our brain in this context. We have a reptilian brain, a social brain, and a logical brain. And we know these parts of our brains once we start to look at them. Our reptilian brain is our fight or flight. It's our first responder, and it doesn't learn. And one of the things, a way of exploring that is if you look at what terrifies you. And I'll go first, because actually even asking you what terrifies you makes everybody go a little bit. What terrifies me is wasps. They absolutely petrify me. And I am in that full-on arm waving, panicking response to when a wasp comes anywhere close. And however much anybody is saying to me, keep still, Vicky, look at the size of it compared to you, I will not be listening to that, because I am just in full-on reptilian response, fleeing or fighting this threat. Now, I've been stung. I know it hurts. It's not agony. I'm not allergic. It's none of that. It's not an existential threat for me. I just am in full-on reptilian brain mode when that happens. And so whatever is the equivalent, and please feel free on the chat, what's your equivalent of a wasp? Tracy, what's yours?
Some dips, big hills, big mountains that can make me feel really want to like stop in my tracks. And professionally at work, if somebody kind of questions my expertise, my knowledge, I can feel the hackles rising, and I have to really think, okay, hold on, Tracy, slow down, slow down. That's the sort of thing that can bring my reptilian response out at work.
Yeah, yeah. And we've got, I'm in good company with wasps by the looks of it. Spiders and bridges, interestingly.
Yeah. We're on there, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely right. Jen, you hate butterflies and moths, and isn't it interesting? You know, I'm with you on the moths, those big squashy bodies, you know, that sort of thing. Heights, another one. And actually, when you heavy machinery, that's interesting. Beth, lift, yes. Oh, really? Now that's interesting. Peppermint oil, I'm having some of that. That repels wasps. Brilliant news. So the idea here is recognizing that feeling in ourselves when that threat comes, and seeing the common feelings it evokes when we get an area of conflict. So Tracy, you just gave a great example there of when your kind of expertise is challenged or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Seeing that that's happening to us. The idea there is, if we can start to see that it's being triggered, what does that do to our behaviors in that sense? Remembering that this part of our brain doesn't learn. It's not there to learn.
And it gives us no time to respond. We just immediately, something comes out of our mouth, or our behaviours just immediately fly off the handle.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the heart of what we're talking about here is actually the part of the brain that controls the majority of what we're doing, because eventually I remember that it's not that painful, and I do calm down eventually. And that's our social brain taking over. So our social brain is responsible for long-term memory. It looks for familiarity. It prioritizes speed over accuracy. So that's why we overread a typo, for example, or, I don't know, put your keys in the fridge and you catch yourself doing something daft. Now, why is this relevant to conflict? Well, because we are social animals, when we start to see that there is a difference of opinion, particularly from an established herd, like an established relationship with a stakeholder or within a team, actually that will trigger our reptilian brain. And it's that I'm being hunted out of the herd reptilian type reaction that can happen. So it's those two parts of the brain operating together can explain sometimes where you get a negative reaction just to the existence of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when we have to really start to help to slow ourselves down and allow evidence to come in and allow our thinking brains to come in. But Vicky's going to explain more about that in a minute, that third part of our brain.
Yeah. So the part of the brain where we think we spend all our time, but we don't, is our good old logical brain. What the logical brain responds to is facts. It's slower to respond, so it's the last of the party. So eventually I do listen to people who say, keep still, it will go away if you stop wafting your arms about like a mad thing. You know, I do listen to that eventually. It's good at dealing with a new situation, but because of that, it's energy inefficient. So the social brain looks to protect it by going and saying, well, this is what I've done before, and therefore this is what we'll do again. So the idea is that the techniques and the tools that we'll share today are all designed to either appeal to the logical brain or the social brain, or ideally both, that will work together to sit on the reptilian brain. And that's what happens in my mind's eye. Between them, the social brain and the logical brain sit on either end of the reptile to calm it down. And hopefully we'll show you how these things then work to sort of help to rationalize conflict when it happens, depersonalize it, because we are reacting to the negative feelings around conflict, and it's feeling personal. And I'll explore a little bit more about that in a minute. And also, and then get beyond the kind of emotion to the kind of cold hard facts, which is of course what our logical brain wants, which then helps us try to resolve it. And what we're talking about here is that all happening in milliseconds is the ideal, because as Tracy says, we need to try and get to the point of stopping our reptilian brain taking over and driving our reaction.
Yeah.
Now, just before we start then, any thoughts from anyone as we've been talking about this? Anybody seen in others or in themselves a reptilian brain reaction takeover? Could be to one of those things that terrifies them. It could be to a situation of work-related conflict in some way. Do share thoughts, because real life do make the best case studies.
And we are all human. We're all striving to have our thinking brain and our social brain working together, but we're human. Sometimes, you know, that reptilian brain will get the better of us.
While you're identifying your reptilian brain reactions, let me share a very common one that we come across. And the purpose of me sharing this one is to ask you to remember, whenever you're dealing with a situation of conflict, is that we can't communicate our intent as human beings. And one of the most common examples of this is good old banter that goes wrong. Let me give you an example. Let's imagine that I am telling Tracy a joke. The reason why I'm telling Tracy a joke is I want to be part of a herd. Ruby Wax tells a brilliant anecdote. You may know Ruby Wax as a comedian, but also she's a writer on mental well-being, having spent quite a lot of years managing her own mental health. And she uses this three-part brain theory that we've just been talking about to explain how important humour is to human beings. And what she says is, I don't understand why the Wax family survived evolution, because they are not tall enough to pick berries, they're not fast enough to catch bison, and they're certainly not tidy enough to tidy up the cave. And then she says, on reflection, we're funny. So actually we're the glue for the herd.
Yes.
So it's a really interesting point that actually humour is really important. So, you know, a lot of, you know, when you do dignity at work, people say, oh, you can't have fun at work.
Yeah.
You can and you should.
Yeah.
But we know it can go wrong. We know it can go wrong. So there is a really interesting piece of theory about what makes something funny to human beings, which is that it must be both unexpected and harmless for it to be funny. And the harmless, harmful dynamic is the crucial thing here. So let's say I tell Tracy that joke, I'm intending to make her laugh. That's my intent, but I'm not able to communicate my intent. All I do is cause the effect. She feels it's not harmless to her. It's too crude, it's too blue, it's too sweary. It certainly won't be funny because it's my joke, but you know, it's not harmless to her. What's your reptilian brain reaction going to be, Tracy, to a very unpleasant joke that I tell you?
I think I'd turn around to you, if my reptilian brain shot in without me being able to stop and think and pause, I'd probably turn around and say, what the hey, Vicky, what are you saying that for? That's outdated. How can you use that language in the 21st century?
Yeah, you're disgusting, something like that, that will be an attack. What's my reptilian brain reaction going to be? Thoughts on the chat, anyone? How am I going to react to that feedback? Yeah, Stacey, absolutely right. Defensive, absolutely right. You're having up for a fight. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's all right.
Yeah, we'll get locked in.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I will be embarrassed, but I won't necessarily be all apologetic about it, will I? I will be defensive, up for a fight, Beth, your point too. Absolutely right. You're having a sense of humour failure, Tracy.
Yeah.
Will be something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then you've got it, reptilian brain and reptilian brain knocking together at that point. Tracy's feedback might be entirely legitimate. That joke, as well as being not funny, is probably not okay. But it doesn't, the way she's communicated it to me almost does the legitimacy of her feedback a disservice, because I won't listen to it.
No.
So you can see completely how that sort of sense of not being able to communicate our intent can have the issue, can create the reaction to the conflict. So we promised you a way to not trigger reptilian brains, and that technique is this. So Tracy, what would you actually say to me in response to my unpleasant joke?
I would say, hey, Vicky, you know, I know you didn't mean to cause offence. I know that you just wanted to have a laugh, and it's important to have a laugh in our team meetings, but actually, you know, that word is outdated and it's made me feel uncomfortable. And if you're not careful, it could cause a lot of people actual offence. So could I ask you, please, don't use that word again? And could I suggest that you use this word or that word instead? That would be fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Vicky.
Lovely, lovely. And I was trying to intervene and I couldn't at that point. And what that technique is called yes, but, so. And as you can see from that, the yes is not agreeing that, yes, that's a funny joke. It's empathizing. I get it. I understand. I appreciate whatever someone's normal kind of language would be in terms of showing empathy. So that's beginning to kind of calm my reptilian brain down to that negative feedback. Then your but and your so are either, the but certainly is either logical brain encouraging or social brain, depending on what you describe in terms of the button. Tracy did a great job of both then in that situation. And then the so is your direction pointer, which is your good old logical brain appealing side of things that will help to calm it down. Now, as you're watching this, are you thinking, goodness me, I use yes, but so, I just didn't realise it was a thing? If you are, please share, because we find ways as human beings to empathise with each other. So there are lots of uses for this yes, but so technique. To say no, to say that's not okay. So if you are using this already and not perhaps even realised it was a thing, then do let us know, because that's really good to know.
The important part is you've got to start with that empathy. As Vicky said, you're not agreeing with them, but you're acknowledging their emotions, you know, and then you can move on to that but and the so, and all three need to be done sequentially like that.
And Heather, you say you use it a lot as a teacher. That's really interesting. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah. Now, yeah, a manager of big personalities, I get it. That's your natural style, you know, that sort of thing. I can see that that's absolutely how you can use it. Now, yes, but so can be used in lots of different ways. And for those of you that use it already, you may know this already, you can power up yes, but so at the end by not being a one-way piece of news in terms of, so I'd like you to do something. You can power it up with questions. And that is a really useful technique to start to get into the debate about an area of conflict where it can arise. And let's have a look at that now. So yes, we've got one example, which is the banter idea of where conflict can arise. The purpose of that is really just to reinforce this point that remember that people can't communicate their intent. And actually what we're talking about here is a piece of unconscious bias. This item of unconscious bias is that when somebody does something to us that's negative, we will assume that they've done it deliberately.
Yes.
So a good example of that is if you've ever had anybody late to a job interview. What did you think of them? Honestly, are they ever going to get that job? Now, in reality, they might have saved a whole basket of kittens from certain demise on the way here, and that's why they're late. But that doesn't enter our consciousness. It's the fact that we assume that they can't be bothered, not investing the time, whatever it might be.
Assumptions.
That's it. That's it. And that social brain is the home of assumption, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. So remember that when conflict's happening, we will assume that somebody is doing it because they don't value us, for example, in some kind of way. So we need to control our assumptions in that respect. We know that the logical brain loves facts, and it loves particularly a good formula. So this is a way of really kind of depersonalizing conflict, to get to the bottom of what really is going on, which then gives you the option to resolve it. And this can be a piece. We're drawing on various things here, including some sort of negotiation theory, actually. But let me start with the formula. It's that conflict arises between Tracy and I if I have a need or a want, and Tracy can't or won't meet that need or want, and that causes that conflict. Now, the point here is that, of course, there can be entirely healthy conflict, but to do that, we need to make sure that we have respectful behaviours in terms of the management of it, which of course is controlling our good old reptilian brain in the response to that conflict, and get to the essence of what the conflict is.
Absolutely. In mediation, we talk about walking towards the conflict, don't walk away from it, walk towards it. But as you said, deal with it constructively and empathetically.
Yeah. And that's what these needs and wants are all about. So what we're aiming to get to is get beyond the needs, actually, to actually what the wants are. So let me explain what we mean by that. So what are our needs in this context? Well, you could use something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs to explain this in a bit more depth. So Maslow's hierarchy is a technique that you may well be, or a piece of theory that you may well be familiar with already. Starts with sort of this idea of the hygiene factors, and we work up the triangle in terms of what our aspirations are, and the top three slices of the triangle, what we're aspiring towards as human beings, is to be part of a team, first of all. Then once we feel that we're in that team, to be valued and respected. And then we get to what everybody describes as or the theory Maslow describes as self-actualization. I try and put it in a slightly simpler language, which is dream. So that's that autonomy, that sense of self, that sense of being able to kind of operate within our own moral code. And that shifts depending on what were the context in which we're talking about it. But you can start to see that in the context of a piece of conflict, for example, oh, I see that need is a need to recognise that I do still respect you, even though we're not agreeing with this. Or yes, absolutely, you're a valued part of the team, even though we don't agree with this. Or absolutely, you are somebody that we want to continue to work with if we're talking about, say, a stakeholder. So let's use an example to bring this alive. Let's say we're talking about an internal stakeholder. We are responsible for providing a report, let's say, and that stakeholder comes to us and says, can you please produce this report? I need it straight away. And we are having to say no. The reaction to our saying no is you're inflexible, you're not responsive.
You don't care.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What's the need that's going on in that respect? What's happening in terms of our triangle, our top three slices of Maslow here? It could be that actually they are saying, look, we're meant to be one team in this organisation. You're meant to be supporting me. I've got this real pressure that, say, my customer is wanting this report from me and you're not helping. It could be something like that.
Yeah.
And in which case that's going to be down here. We're one team. You're not supporting me. Or it could be you're not putting my needs, or you're not considering my needs. You're not respecting me.
Yes.
Could be here, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Either of those. And so the minute that we get that reaction of you're unresponsive, you're not doing your job. Of course, you start to get that reptilian brain reaction.
Yeah, it spirals. Yeah. And the language will get worse. It'll be, your team never looks after us anyway. Your team are known for this. And before you know it, that the conflict has got bigger and bigger and bigger. It's only about one report to begin with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it all breaks loose, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right. And actually, it might be that the substance of the issue is more easily resolved than it actually first appears in that respect, but you can't see that because reptilian brains are snapping all over the place. So understanding what might be driving those behaviours is key, I think, to deal with that. And yes, but so is a great way of trying to. I get that you say that you think I'm unflexible, but let me explain what the challenges are for me. And so let's work with what we can to give you what you need. If we can sort of use yes, but so to get beyond that sort of attacking type language.
Yeah.
Particularly anything that's sort of personal.
Yes.
You're this, you're that, you're the other.
And assumptions, your team are known for this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Remembering that they're going to be thinking that, of course, you're doing it deliberately. You're deliberately not. Yeah. Yeah, that sort of thing. So the first thing to do is get beyond that emotional reaction, if you can, and see it for what it could be. Yeah. And what we're consciously doing is making our logical brain come to the party sooner. Yes. Is the idea. And the idea here is that I saw this brilliant quote the other day that I had to share. You can disagree without being disagreeable. The idea here is trying to make sure that we separate, if you like, the behaviour around the conflict compared to the substantive nature of what's actually going on in terms of the conflict.
And training ourselves to use that non-subjective language. I think training ourselves to keep it open and respectful just is massively helpful at this point. Yeah.
And I think in the spirit of openness, let me just say this is easier said than done. I have to say, I cannot say that I go through life and
no, we're all human.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But it's one of those things that if once we know it's there, it sort of sits on the shoulder. That's the idea. So if we think about getting away from the sort of defensive sort of type language, you then can start to get to the substance of the particular issue. And this is where we're looking at our wants, as in, if I just take us back for a minute to our formula, we've identified what the needs are. That's that Maslow's hierarchy. We now get beyond that to identifying actually what's the substance of the issue. So I need an acknowledgement that my report that I've requested is important to you as well as it is to me. We've achieved that by yes, but soing you're inflexible type reaction. Now we get to actually what it is that you really need, Vicky, is the key thing here. So let's go on and have a look at what these wants are. And you may know this story. So we've got two people having a bit of an argument here on this slide. We can't hear them, but let me tell you that they are disagreeing quite violently about whether a window should be open or closed. How do you resolve that? Thoughts on the chat. One colleague wants the window open, the other colleague wants it closed. Thoughts on the chat for me. How would you resolve that situation? You can see reptilian brains are going mad, can't you?
They're locked in. They are locked in.
Heather, find out the reason for each person's request. Fantastic. Absolutely spot on. You sort it by asking why. You're absolutely right. And what this is doing is getting from what's described as positions to interests. So a position is, I want the window open or I want the window closed. the interest, which is what actually you can use to resolve the conflict, is what you really want to work on. And Stacey, you make a really good point. When it's hard, when it seems to be, it's as if it's something really petty like this. And it seems like there's a binary situation, but that's the problem with positions. They often feel really binary. And you will have seen examples of this in the media very recently. If we just take one of the examples of industrial action that's going on at the moment with the junior doctors are asking for a pay award of 35%. The government's response to that is that that's unreasonable. They are both positions. Because if you think about it, if you ask the question why, you get more detail from underneath both of them. Any pay award that you see being requested, when it's positioned as a percentage, it's a position. And actually getting under the skin of it can really, as to why they've chosen that number, helps you then start to actually work on the negotiation.
Yeah, absolutely. And positions are public. We know what a person's position is. We know person A wants the window open. We know person B wants the window closed. Positions are public, but we need to get to know what's hidden, which are the interests.
And that's a really interesting point, because you see it shifting in negotiations. So certainly more recently, you'll have seen in the junior doctors' pay dispute, they have shifted from the 35% to pay restoration, which suddenly feels slightly less combative, doesn't it, than a big number?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And the government in response has shifted its position from unreasonable to unaffordable. And again, slightly closer to interest. I still don't think it's completely there yet.
No.
But you can start to see that shift, and reading things like this through that lens, you can start to go, oh, I can see what's going on here. And the idea is if you're in the moment, or your teams are in the moment of a conflict, let's say, start to think, okay, is that a position or an interest? Can start to help you ask good questions.
Yes.
And therefore why?
Be curious. Yeah, get to those hidden interests. Yeah, explore them.
So let's think about if we have suppliers and they come to us and say, we're going to need to put our prices up. The immediate reaction to that could be a reptilian no way. The need underneath that could be, actually, we want some recognition that we've been a valued customer. Our loyalty must mean something.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing that goes on. And so actually we could react in a reptilian brain, which is, well, we'll go to a competitor then. You know, we've seen that happen. I know, and you'll, in your role, spend a lot of time engaging with external suppliers in that respect. But actually, if you can get to the bottom of what's the driver of the increase, it might well be that it gives you a good basis for a negotiation. But we'll go to a supplier then, another supplier then, isn't necessarily going to be a good platform. So hopefully you can see that sort of shift from position in that respect into interest. And this quote at the bottom of the slides here is, your position is something you've decided upon. Your interests are what cause you to decide. It's just another way of describing you ask the question why.
Yeah. Is all this making sense? Does this make sense to you? Does it all kind of make things click? What are you thinking? Food for thought, or are you already there?
Good.
Oh, fantastic.
Good. And do share examples of things that you've come across, including the ways you've resolved things.
Yeah. Good to refresh. Thank you, Stacey. It's always good, isn't it?
So what we're talking about, if we pull all of the threads together into one place, if you like, we start by peeling a conflict onion, if you like. So you start with the behaviours, first of all, deal with the reptilian reaction. Remember that you can disagree without being disagreeable. See that for what it is. and address that first. So if you're seeing, say, let's go with another example. Let's say we've got this situation where we're perhaps trying to bring team members back into work from working from home, and you get a very negative reaction to that sort of thing. That's not fair, you're being unreasonable, and that sort of thing. You deal with that first of all. So deal with that. I understand that's how you feel. And of course, you're not agreeing with that or even saying that the view is legitimate, that feeling.
You're acknowledging the emotion, aren't you, Vicky?
That's it.
Acknowledging the emotion.
I get it. I understand that's how you feel.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then you're appealing to a logical brain as to why it is that you're talking about this. So tell me how you're feeling and why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and what you might get out of that is what's driving that emotional reaction. It could be hygiene factors, bottom of Maslow. You know, it could be actually I don't want to afford the commute anymore, or it could be actually, are you suggesting that I'm not working efficiently because you're dragging me back in? You know, we don't know where that person's mind has gone.
No.
So we need to ask the question. This is an interesting scenario, Heather. Let me have a look. A manager is about to issue records of improvement to all staff for refusing to stay late that same day. Ooh, that's interesting. So you're dealing with the manager in terms of that's the way they want to deal with that situation. So say it's got to be a record of improvement in that sense. Now, I'm going to assume, Heather, but stop me if I'm wrong, that actually when we're talking about staying late, that was over and above that employee's contracted hours, or those employees' contracted hours. Tell me if I'm wrong on the chat, obviously. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so so we can see immediately where that's going to cause you know, some employee relations issues, very significant ones potentially in some respects. So that when human beings look to resolve conflict, they do go straight to what they think the resolution should look like. So your yes but so would need to be particularly powered up with actually going into great coaching questions. So talk me through why you think that's the right thing to do. What could the impact of that be? You know, that sort of thing, to almost get the change of mind to become their idea in a lot of respects in that situation.
Absolutely. And acknowledging the emotions, acknowledging you understand why, you know, the pressure that the department's on at the moment. You're acknowledging all of that, but let's have a look at this in the round. Actually, how will this message land? How will this improve relationships moving forward? How will we still be able to get the best out of our people if we pursue this? So then you can have a good short talk about, you know, what other ways there might be around this. And of course, let's not forget that the manager might be feeling that his self-esteem, the respect of the team is in question. So he or she feels under attack, and that's why she or he has gone a bit reptilian, you know, with that kind of knee-jerk reptilian response. So lots to think about, but it's understanding what's going on, what's the underlying reason behind those behaviours that we need to stop and think about.
And Heather, your build on this is a really interesting point. Yeah, it was like a power struggle. So actually there's need, if you like, from the manager's point of view. They're feeling that they're not being respected, valued as the manager of that team. Their authority is being undermined. And this is an example of that they are going into bat with, which actually we need to take a step back and say, actually, what is it about that's making you feel that way, and let's resolve it in other ways. Let's just not use this one issue as the resolution of all ills by you you know, taking the big stick, as it were. And Amanda, the point you make is brilliant. Absolutely, it would prevent any future requests being successful, because ultimately that team are a bunch of social animals and they want to support the herd. They're certainly not going to support a herd leader that feels that they feel they've been treated them unfairly, and they have in that situation.
Command and control really works in 2023.
Absolutely.
So,
so what we're talking about here is then getting beyond the kind of immediate, that's it, I'm going to issue this letter of concern or whatever it might be, to then the position. So what is it that's going on? They don't respect me, is your position. And then, okay, let's get under the skin of that. And then actually we can start to resolve the issues that are going on and find other ways of resolving that conflict. Brilliant example, Heather. Thank you so much. So much. Yeah. Yeah. So as I say, this is the idea of this, taking the ick out of the conflict, really. Deal with the behaviour first, then deal with the position, and then deal with the interest.
Yeah.
So whether that's a situation of the internal stakeholder, as we were talking about, saying you're unresponsive, deal with that behaviour first. I understand that that's how you feel, but I can't deal with what you're trying to achieve in the timescale, so let's figure it out. Understand what the position is. Well, I need this report, by saying, okay, so, you know, when you say this report, what does it need to contain? What do you need it for? And then suddenly you start to find a way. Well, I could do that rather than that.
Is there a piece of information I can give you by 5 o'clock tonight? I can't give you the whole report, but how about that? Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about the window situation, it could be that one person wants the window closed because there's lots of construction work going outside and the noise is driving, you know, them crazy. So maybe some noise cancelling. You know, if the other person needs it open for ventilation and fresh air, that's the way you get to really, you know, down to earth, universally acceptable resolutions of things by asking those powerful questions.
So let me hand over to you. In light of all that we've been talking about, where have you seen some of these techniques in action? What about yes, but so? Because actually, when you think about yes, but so, you could use it in all 3 layers of our onion in that respect. Deal with the behaviour, deal with the position. I understand that you feel that you need exactly that report, but the information that you need in it, we could get in other ways or supply to you in other ways. And so would that be acceptable to you? You can use yes, but so at each of the layers to get to the interests and then get to a resolution. But that's the theory. You've got the experience. Talk to us in terms of examples where perhaps you've had yes, but so in use, or where you now, reflecting on it, think it could be useful to you. While you're thinking, what somebody did say to me that they used it to break up with a hairdresser, which made me giggle.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
And on a more serious note, actually, somebody told me that they'd used it to persuade their son to have a back operation.
Yes.
That they felt unable, that their son didn't want to have it done.
I remember this man's dad said his first instinct was to go straight in there. Of course you're having this back operation. What are you talking about? But he didn't. He held back and he let his logical thinking brain come through and his social brain with his son. And instead of which he said, hey, you know, let's have a look at all these options then. And he just slowed his brain down, had a great conversation. So what are we going to do then? What's your decision? And the son, having been able to think about all the different options, Dad asked all the right questions. He came to his own conclusion. No, I will have the back operation, and all went well. So that was a great example. I remember that.
Absolutely. Okay, so what I'm going to do is probably bring the session to a close as far as the techniques that we wanted to share with you today, with huge thanks for all of the contributions that you've made so far. More than happy to take any other questions or observations on the chat, but you can hopefully see that the starting point of the techniques really all come from this fact that actually we are driven more by our unconscious mind than we think we are. But actually, if we can get to a position of healthy conflict, what that means is that healthy conflict is where we deal with the substance of the issue and we're engaging logical brains to deal with it. Even the word conflict can drive reptilian brains to trigger. And the other area where you can see reptilian brains triggering in this context is battle language.
Yes.
We need to war game this out.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes
Absolutely.
Here. Yeah. Or if you sometimes see in negotiations where people talk about, well, we'll offer them X, but there'll be strings attached to it. That sense of threat or sense of expectation,
manipulation, even
manipulation, better word, much better. All of that will trigger other people's reptilian brains. So look for that sort of language, as I say, battle language. And it did make me smile earlier on the chat when you said, "Oh, sorry for shouting." But shouting absolutely does trigger reptilian brains. We have a client who is a manufacturing facility. I mean, they make cakes. I mean, it's just the most lovely smelling environment you wouldn't believe. But of course, it's very high paced, high pressured, but it's also noisy. And so what they find is they have to shout, even if it's, "Can you just slow that belt down?" So it's not, they're not shouting at each other, but they found that conflict was happening and people were complaining about it. And actually what it was is the fact that people were shouting, because it does trigger reptilian brain. So people were assuming that they were being shouted at. So unconsciously, that can happen.
I get that.
Yeah, so sometimes with safety issues, there can't be there has to be but sometimes there has to be an absolute no. Yeah, Heather, it's a really good point, but you need to give reasons. Absolutely right. People do things better when they know why they're doing them. And, yes, okay, in an emergency health and safety situation, of course, you need to trigger somebody's reptilian brain. I can't speak of this personally because I've got no personal experience of this, but somebody once said to me that who was in the military, that they will deliberately make choices when people are injured on the battlefield. Their commanding officer will yell at them to make them move, to make them trigger the reptilian brain, in that situation.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to stop, sort of thing. If we think about toddlers running towards ponds, we're not going to start reasoning with them. We're just going to tell them no, of course not. But then you would follow up in that situation because people do things better when they know why they're doing them.
And it's preserving those constructive long-term working relationships. We can all be forgiven for one or two reptilian outbursts, but when our behavior is consistently reptilian, that's when our reputation starts to kind of go downhill.
And this can be a way in which you can distinguish between performance management and bullying as well. If you think about the feedback that Tracy gave me about the joke at the top of this session, she was quite entitled to give me that feedback because the joke wasn't okay. But if she'd said, "Vicky, you're disgusting," for example, then actually you can see where you get, well, my manager's called me disgusting, and then suddenly you get a grievance around something along those lines. So actually getting between the behavior and the substance of the issue is so important. For those of you that are customer facing as well and dealing with complaints, say, from customers about team members, the way they've handled the situation, sometimes that can really help to get to the bottom of some of those issues as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to draw the session to a close with huge thanks from both of us for your time joining us today. I hope that's been a useful, just sub an hour. We will send to you after the event a little bit more information about all that we've talked about, including that technique. We have a technique that helps deal with the difference between performance management and bullying, we are running a webinar on that tomorrow morning. If you'd like to join us, you'd be more than welcome. We'll send you the link out to that, but we'll also record it. So if you can't get to it tomorrow morning because you've been involved in this today, completely understand. We will also share the recording of this as well, if that's helpful too. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We hope it's been useful. Thank you for the comments that are coming in. I'm really pleased. And hopefully we will see you at a future shared services event. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.